Elon just bought Twitter. The Tesla bot is absolutely amazing, a technical marvel. FSD is also on the cusp of transitioning to working 100%. It's on the horizon, but I don't know so much, so I need someone who knows it all. That's why I've invited Dr. Knows It All today. So Doc, or Doctor, I should...
Just John.
John is fine. So John, maybe you tell something about you, what you do, and yeah, we can just jump right into the episode.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, probably the people would know me more from the YouTube channel in the wide world, which is Dr. Know It All. So that's great. And if you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out. But in my sort of day job is I teach at the University of Georgia. I teach 3D animation, design, like sound design, media design, things like that, and also some classes in AI as they're applied to more creative tasks, and co-founder of a company too, Automatic.io. So people should check that out when they have a chance. So yeah, we actually build AI-based tools to help with 3D animation and digital art problems. So cool. I'm a busy guy. As you know, because you've been trying to set up a meeting with me and you're like, oh gosh, I'm like, maybe a week from now.
Yeah, very busy man. I've seen that you went to the TeslaCon, or was it the TeslaCon?
Yeah, TeslaCon Florida. Yeah.
Wanted to start with that. What was your impression? How was it? Maybe you can tell our audience.
It was fantastic. I think Nick and everybody else that put it together did a really fantastic job. It was the only problem is the same thing that happens every single time, is that there's way too much stuff to try to take in one day. So we actually had some things the next morning as well, and we got to go to Kennedy Space Center, which I hadn't been to. This is telling about how old I am. The last time I was there, I believe, was 1972. And at the time, I don't think there was it's like kind of like Disneyland now. There's all these rides and there's all this cool stuff, and you go to see the Atlanta Space Shuttle and there's like this big reveal and all of this. And as far as I remember, when I was a little kid, you just walked around a field and they had a Saturn V on its side. I think it was the one that's actually in the building now, but it was just out there, just laying around, and maybe a couple of older rockets were sitting up, but it was just an open field in Florida with maybe one building attached. So it was quite educational to go and see how much it's changed in the last 50 years. Yeah, 50 years. Wow. So anyway, so it just made me feel old, but I was really geeking out because my sort of first love is space. So, I talk a lot about Tesla on my channel, and I love talking about automated cars and robots and all of that stuff. But if you said, what did I want to be since I was a little tiny kid, it was always an astronaut. And I actually applied to NASA a couple of times and got rejected. So
sad.
I know,
maybe SpaceX is hiring.
Maybe if SpaceX is hiring astronauts, I'll be happy to jump on board if they want an old astronaut. So anyway, yeah. So there you go. It was a lot of fun. And of course I went to AI Day on September 30th. I was going to say earlier this month, but it was actually the very end of last month. So that was pretty mind-blowing. As I'm sure you know, everybody who's seen it has been either reacted and said that nothing new was shown and it was very uninteresting, or they were completely blown away by what happened, and kind of no in between. So it's a very interesting reaction that people had to AI Day.
Yeah, I've looked at AI Day. I was watching the whole thing, and I was also very amazed. And what struck me very much is, until today, it seems like the general media didn't really pick up on that and didn't realize what was happening there, because it's not about the movement of the robot. Boston Dynamics did a great job with their robot there. And I mean, parkouring, dancing robots, but they have more than 30 years of development on their back. And if you compare it to the Tesla bot is about the brains. It's not only about the bot, but it also has technical stuff that is focused on mass production. That's totally a different tier or a different category. I know you can build a great robot by hand, and but if you want to focus on mass production, some things might change in the process, and you have to adjust your product. But maybe we start with TeslaBot, because
sure.
Yeah. So what was the for you the absolute biggest takeaway that was so amazing for you that you said, okay, this is the big point, something that like this should be in every headline right now about the TeslaBot?
This is going to sound really, really dumb because of the other robots that have come out before, but the fact that it was able, the very first thing, they opened up the stage door and the robot walked out and it waved to everybody and turned around and walked back. And I said, wow, that is amazingly impressive. And I'll get into why. And then when they showed the second prototype that was much more polished and looked like, it looked like something you could go out and buy. The first one was clearly
Yeah.
some stuff that a guy built in his shop and soldered things together.
Yeah.
And they were little lights. I really liked the flickering lights and everything. It was very cool. But it was clearly not something you're going to go out and buy at the store. But the second one, I think it's called AI2. I think that was what its name is at least that's what I was told by somebody in the know. That thing looked like something that you could go buy, right? It looked like a mass producible robot. So starting with that second point, clearly Tesla has gone the direction of most of these other robots in history, aside from like my Roomba, which I just realized in a half an hour is going to turn on, so I'll have to remember to turn it off. But aside from and Scott Walter gets really mad at me or anybody else who calls it a robot, but you could call this an automated vacuum cleaner. And that's clearly made to be mass produced. It's relatively inexpensive to make and all of the parts and everything. But the kind of humanoid robots that we've seen, they just aren't designed to be mass produced at this point. And so Tesla is treading new ground here by obviously trying to create something that's much cheaper to make and that you can manufacture it in quantities rather than as opposed to Bumblebee, which was clearly hand built, right? You can't build 100,000 of those in a year because you don't have enough human beings to do it, even if you wanted to. So you have to make something that's much, much more easy to mass produce. As far as the reason why the walking out on stage, which didn't seem all that impressive, was super impressive to me, was number one, they did this in a year, which is crazy, like from scratch to a year. Now they do have Dennis Hong, they have the people at Ramallah, they have a huge amount of collective knowledge that they're using to get there, but the fact that they were able to do what I consider to be the hard part. So the hard part that everybody has always had for robotics is having a brain. So people can build these robots that look like human beings and they move and they can stand up lately, but they don't have brains. But Tesla has the full self-driving brains that they can transplant, which was their huge advantage. Their huge disadvantage was that they didn't have a robot. And so I was like, if they can build a robot that can even do anything by AI day number 2, they've won essentially because they have all of the other pieces in place that nobody else has. They have the manufacturing capabilities, they have the brains with the full self-driving and AI team, and they have the capability to make this thing. So in my mind, it was like, if this thing can, even if it's just the top half of the body and it can wave or something, I would have been astounded and I would have said fantastic. And the fact that it walked without help, without a tether, that sort of thing in my mind was completely mind blowing. And at this point, we're a month later, and they kind of said that they thought that AI2 prototype would probably be walking by now. So probably internally, that one is walking around now and doing tasks. So yeah, that's the reason why I was blown away. And that's the reason why a lot of people if you don't understand that it's kind of backwards from what you think it should be doing Boston Dynamics and doing parkour and doing flips and all of that.
Where the somersaults, where the handsprings.
Right. But those robots are kind of one-off. They're built, they're hand-built one at a time, more or less. And they're not really designed to even Spot, which is the cheap one, the dog-looking one, which is really creepy because its legs are backwards. So I don't like that. It kind of disturbs me when I watch it walk. But yeah, but even those are just not designed to be mass manufactured, and so there's a big problem with that. And obviously Tesla is working from the ground up to make this thing mass manufacturable, and that's going to be huge. And it's got the neural network architecture. Actually, the vision system, the control system in a robot is much more difficult because you've got hands, you've got multiple fingers, you've got a body that you have to keep upright. When you think about an automobile, it's very, very simple. It's accelerate, decelerate, and steer. There's only 3 controls. So the input is really complicated. The output is very simple. But again, if we go back to the Tesla bot, they're able to use this system and have this robot stand up and walk around. So they're it's not mastered, but they've got a lot of progress on the output, on the control part of the robot. The input part is way simpler. People keep saying it's way more complicated than driving, but it's actually way simpler than driving because you're going so slowly. You're going in a car, you could be doing 120, 130 kilometers an hour, and the car has got to react. And if it makes a mistake, it crashes and could kill people, right?
Exactly.
A robot's going, what, maybe 5 kilometers an hour, that's at a full walk, and it's not designed to go any faster than that. So it could go that fast, and it's not going to become like one of those Mortal Kombat robots or something where it's punching or every movement is going to be relatively slow. And if it gets stuck, it can just stop for a minute. It can just go like, okay, wait. Now I can go on, right? So it can think about what it needs to do, whereas a car can't do that. If you take a 2-second pause for a little coffee break, if the car does that while you're driving at over 100 kilometers an hour, bad things are going to happen. So, in my mind, the AI aspect of the robot, once they have it solved for driving, people keep saying, oh, but the world, and you have to deal with people, and you have to go upstairs and all that. So I'm like, yeah, that's easy peasy stuff. I mean, not discounting that. It's going to be very difficult. But because of the reduced speed and the reduced criticality of making decisions, it can be a lot more chill. So that's why I was blown away. And that's why I think a lot of people weren't, because they didn't understand that it's all upside down. That was the hard part for Tesla. And they proved they could do the hard part. And the easier part is going to be all the other things that everybody else thinks is the hard part.
What I found very funny is, I liked that section of your video when you were talking to Jason or James Duma.
Oh, James. Yeah.
James Duma. Yeah. Duma. Yeah. You were talking about the actuators in the fingers, that they align with, so that the fingers can align, and how difficult just this small thing can be. And
right. That was actually with Scott Walter.
Oh, with Scott Walter. Okay, I was mixing that up.
He's like the James Dalma of robotics. He's like
okay, yeah, I know.
James Dalma is the James Dalma. I don't know. Nobody is James, because James knows everything. But if you want to take a little tiny piece of robotics, then that would be Scott. But yes, but how it had to basically contact, and then they would slide across each other to make that okay.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's crazy how much detail. Like the robot is so much more detailed in that regard. You have to, like with like you said, the input is difficult, but the output also. But with the car, it's more like, okay, the input is difficult, but the output is very easy peasy in relations to the robot. So what do you think would be the biggest challenges for the Tesla bot to be mass produced, or how do you see it? What does Tesla have to address before the Terminators are walking around?
Right. I know. It does look a little like that, doesn't it?
A little bit. But just 5 kilometers per hour, I'm not as scared. I could just tip it over.
Let's hope nobody has like a little hack that they can go make it suddenly right. Yeah, that would be terrifying. So I think the biggest issue mechanically, certainly software is going to be the biggest issue over time, but I think the biggest issue mechanically is the actuators. And so it was very, very good to see that they've made huge amounts of progress in the actuators. And that's, of course, the things that rotate the parts around.
Yeah.
So they had, aside from the fingers, which have their own actuators built into the palm, they have 6 actuators, types of varieties of actuators that operate the entire robot. So that's actually a good thing, because they've reduced it, because I think aside from the fingers, if I'm remembering correctly, they have 28 degrees of freedom. And so you'd think they would need 14, because you split it down the middle. So you'd think they would need 14 actuators, one for each joint, for each side. But they've cut that to less than half by going to 6 and being able to use that. So that makes a really, really big difference. And that means that they can mass produce those, because you can produce less actuators and more of them. So if you're making 100,000 robots, it's only It's 600,000 actuators, but it's only like a couple 100,000 of each one. So, or not only, it is a couple 100,000 of each one. So the more you make, the more savings there are because you can
Exactly.
automate that process. And James Downwell, he did say that he said the actuators, when you look inside them, they did that cutaway in the presentation so you could see inside. And he said those things are really complicated right now. So he said, probably what would happen over time is they would reduce the parts, they would make them simpler to build, and the design of them would be somewhat simpler. But so that, I think mechanically that's the hardest part. Clearly, stamping metal parts is not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And if they've got the basic formula for how the knees and the elbows and all the joints and everything work, it's just a question of being able to produce those quickly with die casting machines or stamping machines or something like that. And then, of course, there's the brains, which they've all got. Apparently, it looks like it's a little weather sealed box, kind of like torso sized. And it's got, I think it was 2.3 kilowatt hours of battery. And the I asked after the presentation, I said, because you could see the board, it looks like a half of a board. So if you take Tesla's full self-driving board, there's two identical chips, the hardware 3. And it looked like what they did was they cut it in half, but also it looks very different than hardware 3. So I went up to one of the engineers after the presentation and I said, that's hardware 4, right? And he went, so,
You got me. Okay.
basically I can't tell you, but
yeah.
So anyway, and clearly why wouldn't they use that? Because that's the next generation. And then my understanding is that possibly already, but I think almost definitely by the beginning of the year of 2023, they will be putting hardware 4 into the vehicles. So there would be no sense in using an old piece of hardware that they're already it makes logical sense. And the thing can run it at lower power and stuff like that too, because it's a newer generation chip. So anyway, so they've got all that. And then it really just comes down to software. That's what Tesla has been working on really, really hard. That's obviously why we have AI Day. There's a lot of hardware, there's Dojo, there's the Optimus bot, things like that, but they also are really trying hard to recruit good software people. And that's a super big challenge. It's really, really hard for them to make that stuff work. But, the beautiful virtuous cycle of this is the better Tesla's full self-driving gets, the better Optimus gets. And then if Optimus discovers something cool and new and interesting, like it has different environments it understands, that can feed back into full self-driving too.
Yeah, that's right. That was my biggest takeaway, because I'm not as much as an hardware guy, besides screwing around with the PSP back in the day to get some games on that illegally and stuff like that. That's hypothetical. Or I've just played around with the iPhone to change the screens and stuff like that, but nothing else. So I was so amazed by the software again, because if the labeling software and the labeling is that was something that I found very interesting. I mean, it was still in limited cases, of course, because it's more or less a prototype. They have to look how the robot will react. But if they start to label everything and the labeling process gets automated more and more, and we all know in the AI space there are incredible things with labeling happening also. It gets better, exponentially better and better. And also with picture generation, for example, like DALL-E, it's absolutely amazing what's happening right now, and so fast. Right. And I mean, we see those iterations improve by half a year, but over 100% improvement. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And what do you think about that software?
Oh, on the full self-driving itself?
No, on the labeling of the Tesla bot.
The labeling. Oh, well, I mean, it's all part of the whole thing, but yeah.
The intelligence of the robot, let's just say like that, maybe, yeah.
Oh, you're talking about with Optimus.
With Optimus still,
when you could see it semantically. Yeah, all of that stuff is coming directly from full self-driving. That's all. It's all stuff that I've seen before in regards to FSD. So it's brilliant how they're using it. But that's why I said the beauty of being Tesla is that they already have this.
Yes.
And so, yes, they have to retune it because cars don't usually see flower pots and watering cans and things like that. So they have to readjust the weighting. But all of the networks already exist, and it's just like so as soon as like last year at AI Day #1, I said, oh, if anybody, in my mind, I said, if Tesla can actually build a robot that can walk, just do basic stuff, they've already won the race, because everything else, they have the manufacturing prowess.
Exactly.
They can make electric motors. They know how to do that. Goodness gracious. And you need a lot of those for those. They know how to do power density. They know how to do the AI part of it. They know how to do the vision system. I was like, the thing that they don't have is a walking robot. And that's like, circling back again, that's why as soon as that thing walked out on stage, I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, they did the one part that I was like, I don't know if they can do that part. And so everything else, I think they're just going to be miles ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. That's absolutely astonishing. And maybe I can follow up with another question here, because if you look at the German OEMs and the car companies that we have here, because on Tesla Fix, I try to get a unique German perspective on Tesla. That's why I analyze the German companies as well, and the competition. And competition, I have to put that in quotes. Because,
speaking of which, I have some, like on my Patreon, I have a bunch of German,
subscribers,
really lovely subscribers. Yeah. So Claudia actually just right before we started said that they are felling the first trees at Giga Berlin for phase 2.
Great.
Like either today or tomorrow. So that's
exciting.
Big news.
Yeah.
That's very big news.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. So I'm going to look into that after this episode immediately.
I call her my German office, because she's always like, here. So
cool,
you get
great.
it first. You get to break the news right here. So
I'm too small right now, but I hope I'm going to get a Claudia too someday.
There you go.
That feeds me information.
Yeah, exactly. Say join. Tell me about this stuff too.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Really
no. Nice information. I really love that. If you compare the companies, because I really dig deep into VW, because it's the biggest German automaker here, because all the brands that they have, and it's a big player. So I've looked into the company, and I realized that I think VW is not capable of shifting as fast to that, because they have a huge board. They have a lot of decision makers. The Porsche P family is always there, and that's a family dynasty that is very it's very complicated with them, I think, and stuff like that. But I don't know details. But I'm assuming. I study media design, communication design, and I focus on wording, on how they talk to their employees and how they do that. And what I realized is, if you just compare the anti-handbook from Tesla and the compliance handbook that you have to look through with HR for 1 week in VW, more or less, is so different in the wording, because we Germans have a cultural tendency to secure everything. We're very security focused in terms of don't make mistakes. Everything has to be perfect from the get-go. Before we try something, we just talk about it and analyze it to the last nut and bolt before we start. And the Americans have a very different approach there, a cultural approach, because America is more or less a pioneer state. It was an immigrant state. Many Europeans just fled more or less from the tyrannies we had in Europe. So they went there because it's the land of opportunity. And Americans had to adapt because they had to go to the West. They were just uncertainties. And also a huge component is that the Americans had different languages at first, because all around Europe, different dialects and everything. That's why Americans are quite literal in everything they say. It's very precise and literal and not complicated, very simple language if they explain something to a new person. And also the hands-on approach is very prevalent in the US, that you say, this is how we did it before. You just try it like this and look how it's done, and then we start to test and stuff like that, and we just do it. And the Germans are more or less, no, I have to explain a very complicated, complex concept first, and then you have to do it like this exactly, and stuff like that, and not a hands-on approach as much. But what I wanted to now back to the question, and this is just a little bit of context. Why do you think that Tesla performs as well? I think the company culture is so greatly set up, and also with the hiring, and that this is the dynamic that makes Tesla successful. And what are your thoughts on the company cultures there? Maybe you have something. Like, why is Tesla so successful?
Oh gosh,
yeah, big question.
They do. It's because of the culture, and I think also because they just have a work ethic that's pretty outrageous.
Yeah,
like everybody that I talk to who either is working for Tesla or has worked for Tesla is like, I didn't have a life.
Yeah.
I basically went to work, and that's what I did. I think it is worth, taking a moment to talk about American culture, but also South African culture, since that's where Elon was raised, So I'm trying to remember exactly how somebody was talking to me about Germany versus, or a lot of countries versus the United States. And I think it was Germany specifically, but it was like in Germany, you say what you can't do. Yeah. And the person has to argue until they can prove that you can do it. And then you make a law change. In the United States, it's do whatever the hell you want to do until somebody says, wait, don't do that anymore. So it's almost backwards. And you can see that's the reason why you can make very rapid progress in a place like the United States, because like full self-driving is a crazy thing. I love it. And I'm immensely happy that it exists and I'm able to use it, but it's also like, really, should this actually be out on the road right now? It's a little bit of that sort of sense, especially when it started. It's very, very good now and very, very safe. And I think demonstrably safer than human drivers by themselves. But when it started, it was not that way so much. So, that's a thing where if you go to another culture, another country's culture, and they're like, no, you can't do that. Right. So I have seen some, again, from the outside, I've seen some indications that there are European countries that are attempting to move in that direction in terms of regulation, because what they realize is there's a really important aspect of that. And that is that economically, your country will be left behind if you don't get on board things like this. Right. Because if you just wave a magic wand and there are robotaxis or autonomous trucks that can drive cargo between destinations without a human driver, well, suddenly that's a whole thing where you don't need a person or multiple people in the loop for that. So your economy can actually go up because people can be more productive doing other things, because it's not a very productive use of my time to commute to work and go like this. It's a 20-minute commute, but each way, so that's 40 minutes a day. I'm going like this. That's not I could be doing better things in the car if I could have my laptop out and be answering emails or recording YouTube videos or whatever it would be. But there are things that would make me more productive if I didn't have to waste my time doing that. And then just take that to the next level when you think about transferring cargo where you're driving all day. That's what a human's job is, just to shuttle cargo in a truck back and forth between places. So you can make society more productive if you can instantiate those regulations quickly. And so this was not my idea, but somebody was telling me about this. They were saying that Germany, and I think it was France actually, were really seriously looking into this, because they were saying, we could be left behind because our GDP, like the product of our country, could be reduced effectively because all these other countries that are allowing autonomous vehicles will be more productive than we are. And so it could actually effectively reduce the country's competitiveness on the global scene. And that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. I didn't come up with this idea, but I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I think that once it's proven safe, there's a really solid case for making it happen as quickly as possible. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very complicated. Like in Germany, really, like you said, the law is, or in Europe, the law is flipped upside down. If you want to build something, you have to get approval beforehand, and everything has to be air sealed tight. But if you are moving in an area where you're so far in innovation and so far on the horizon or the frontier, new product categories will be produced. And that's why maybe the rules are stupid how they are in place right now. So I like the American approach, and I think Tesla wouldn't have happened if if it was founded in Germany, for example, because regulation is so hard, and we have to remember that also VW works inside of this system. Also, that's if VW was founded in America, maybe it would be a different success story maybe. And also
VW has been pretty successful.
I wanted to add that too. To be fair, VW really did a great job, especially in the 70s, for example, where the Japanese manufacturers took over and just produced cars like crazy. And you could see that the American market was flooded and the German market wasn't flooded. That they really did a great job because they focused so much on quality and everything. And the Europeans are a little bit more picky with the cars, I would say.
Right.
And everything has to be perfect. And especially the Germans are so detailed and look at the stitching on the car and how the door closes and everything. The panel gaps was outrageous.
The first car I ever looked at panel gaps on was my Tesla Model Y.
Yeah.
And it was only because everybody talked about it. And I was like, what is a panel gap? I've owned many, many cars in my life and I don't care as long as the door closes, it's fine.
But that's also very interesting because the quality control is still a huge problem or a huge deal for especially the German market. They won't accept anything besides like a perfect vehicle. And the Germans are really, they look into stuff like that. They walk around their car and look at every detail. Some of them, not everybody. I'm not like this, but there are many people who are like this. So this if Tesla wants to like take over the German market, which they already did, they really like their numbers are very great. They took over the VW Golf, which is that's crazy. That's really crazy for Germany. But what I wanted to say is that I also made a video on my channel about that. That's the last advantage Germany had, the quality control. And or China also has great quality control. You have to give them credit because that changed a lot. And now they are really superb in quality control. But exactly in that point, the Tesla Gigafactory in Germany is such a great idea because Germans are good in quality control. And eventually Tesla has to, if they just focus on mass production, they have to also focus on quality control, of course, and that's why they have to find the balance. And I think it's so good to have the company inside of our home turf because VW notices that, the politicians notices that, and then hopefully change will happen in Germany because that's so. Germany is very slow in adapting change, and it grinds my gears as a German. I sit here, please do something.
Well, I mean. The weird thing is that Tesla started in California, of course, because that's where they were. And California is the most like Germany in terms of just the amount of regulations on businesses. And to the point that it's excessive. And you see that Tesla moved to Texas instead because they wanted to. So the interesting thing about the United States is it's 50 countries.
Exactly.
Every single country has its own weird little thing. So effectively what they did was they just picked up and moved from Germany to Italy or something. They said, now we're going to this other place, right? I actually kind of wonder about Giga Berlin if they produce the cars and somebody goes around and they're like, this is not German quality. We're going to ship it to Italy. So they'll ship all the ones with the little panel gap weirdnesses and things like that to France or Italy or something instead. I would not be surprised if they did that, honestly, because they might be like, the Germans will never accept this one, but the Italians, not to pick on Italians, but Italians make beautiful cars, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, somebody else will take it because they don't care so much. But you could see how difficult a time Tesla had with Germany. They got there and they were like, oh, we're going to start building. They're like, wait, you don't have your 25 different permits. And did you see when they got done with it, the amount of paperwork?
I know. I've seen the picture.
And it was something like 25 volumes of just, I was like, oh. And it was printed on trees that had to be cut down and printed.
I know. Germany is not digital. Germany is not digital. It's still in the paper age.
Well, it's just ironic because they were complaining about cutting down the trees and all this stuff, and then they used all these trees to print the paper. So,
what's interesting about that is that I think in Germany, that's my opinion, environmental groups are instrumentalized by conservative people who don't want a foreign company inside of Germany. That's why they start to push anything against that. And Germans have a tendency to, why don't they do renewable energy more? Wait, you want to have solar things here at my backyard? No, right. I won't do. I won't allow that. And then they just jump onto the fences and start to yell and start to complain at the government as well. That's why nothing gets approved as fast, because Germans are very strange.
It happens in the U.S. too. It's in the U.S. There's a term. It's called NIMBY, which is not in my backyard.
Yes. Okay.
There you go. It's like, we want a new power plant, but don't you dare put it where I can see it. It's like, it's got to be far away. So.
And when Giga Berlin was built, there were protesters. It was so funny. Right. I've seen it, and they walked through the forest and they were saying, look at this, and how the forest is, and we can't let this happen. But this is a forest that was made for paper production.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it had bombs from World War II inside. You aren't allowed to go there because there are mines everywhere. It had to be demined also for the buildup of Giga Berlin in Brandenburg. And it's like, it was ridiculous at some point. And what you said with the bureaucracy in Germany, it's you have to imagine the Berlin airport was built in 6 to 7 years because the fire regulations, for example, changed while building it. So it doesn't comply the rules anymore. We have to we build it again.
So you don't get to grandfather things in if they. That's one thing. If they change the rules after you're already started, it's like, no, you get to use the old ones.
Yeah, no. Not. I don't know why this happened, and also with the contractors and stuff like that, it was a huge mess. That's why Germany is very slow. But I was very glad, because 2 years for Germany is absolutely crazy. It's very fast. For Germany, it's very fast. We cannot expect Chinese regulations, for example. That's not happening here, but yeah.
But you also saw the problems, because Tesla took a huge risk.
Exactly.
Because they actually built a lot of it before they got the approval, they could have just been forced to tear it down and leave. So,
when Elon announced that, I've got a heart attack. What, you want to build that in Germany? I was like, oh God, don't do it. Please don't do it. Because the airport thing was spreading in the news at that time, and I was like, oh my God, if that's the same case, 7 years for a factory, oh God, please don't do it. But it's such a good move. It was a great idea, because we have a lot of engineering talent in Germany that waits to get swooped up by Tesla, because some are also a little bit annoyed by the stagnation happening, and they want to be on the forefront of engineering. That's why it's great to have them. I mean, Germans are very good in engineering, and also VW has great patents and really nice R&D also, but they are not as focused on electromobility, but now they changed, and hopefully they will jump on it. But I really see that Tesla will take over a lot areas. Yeah. I have another question. VW quite recently changed the steering wheel from the digital capacitive touch steering wheel to a regular manual one. Again, they changed back.
Really?
Because people had wrong inputs while turning the wheel.
Oh.
And I wanted to ask you, because I'm not a Tesla owner, I wanted to ask you. I've also asked Farzad and many people on Twitter, but they didn't respond, sadly. But does this happen with the Tesla?
No, the inputs. So, I mean, we have a Model Y, but I think all the controls are more or less the same. I think the Model S is a little different, and I think that might have some capacitive touch sensors on the thing for like the turn signals. I've test driven the Model S, and that's the one with the yoke, with only the U shape.
The yoke,
but I've test driven it, and like, I definitely know the turn signals, because it doesn't have the thing that you push down.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference.
Which is it's very nice once you get used to it. But I think it was kind of like a keyboard. So I think it was like a push, and it would actually engage a mechanical switch. But I can't guarantee that, because I didn't drive it long enough.
I was just wondering, but I can imagine if Tesla has a capacitive touch thing on the wheel, I think they would have a solution for that. I strongly believe that. But yeah, that's something I wanted to clarify. But yeah, maybe I have to ask someone who has a Model S Plaid or something. To it
I
has to
know a
be
few
defined.
people who have them. They're really fun to drive. One of the things is you could always disable it once the turning
Exactly.
angle is
Start.
big
Yeah.
enough. You just disable the
Yeah.
capacitive
Exactly.
so that while
Yeah.
you're making a big maneuver. The other thing that really needs to happen, and this is something where there are regulations in the US. Speaking of, the side view mirrors need to go away because apparently they increased the amount of drag a huge amount, which I didn't
Exactly.
realize.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
But beyond that, the steer by wire, that's what I was
A
going to
steer
say.
by wire. Yeah.
So currently, it's a mechanical connection. So as you turn, it actually turns. So like one time around with the steering wheel turns at a certain number of
Yeah.
degrees or something like that. Whereas with a yoke, the obvious thing to do would be to say like, okay, if you're moving only 0 or just a couple of kilometers an hour, when you make a small turn, it turns at a very
Yeah.
large amount. And when you're on the highway going fast and you turn it, it makes a small adjustment. So it's obvious that that's what needs to happen, but there are regulations in place that I believe the Model S kind of already does that, but but they're not allowed to unlink it, so they can't make it
Okay.
variable. Yeah, so I think that's my understanding of what's going on under the hood. So if the regulations changed, I believe that they could actually implement that in older cars, but I'm not positive about that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that would make yoke steering much better
Yeah,
because you would never
exactly.
have to turn it upside down. You just would have to turn it a little bit to
Yeah.
make a turn.
Yeah. That
So,
would make sense. Absolutely. Yeah.
right.
I'm that would be great in the Cybertruck as well because I'm anticipating to. I've pre-ordered one, but it looks very grim to get this thing onto European roads because regulations are a little bit different here.
Right.
Yeah, but I
They're
would love to
gonna
drive
have to
around with
probably
that.
make a mini version of it.
Yeah, they
The
have to. Yeah,
Cybertruck Mini.
especially it's
So,
because it's so hard. We have a regulation in Europe that the car has to be a little bit softer for pedestrian safety, and if it's like
right.
a metal blade driving through traffic. But we also have, for example, those Dodge Rams. They are imports, but
Right.
they are allowed, and the hood is like this big. Like, I mean, this
Yeah.
could eat up a human, like. No
Right.
problem. So I don't know why they are allowed on the roads, but no Cybertruck. But it's you have to wait. But my hopes are not high. But maybe
When I
someday.
stood next to the Cybertruck, I finally got to see one in person, and the peak of the roof, I believe, was taller than me. So, I'm 5'10", or what is that, about 177 or 178 centimeters tall. So it was taller than me. So I was like, wow, that's kind of weird to look at a car and see like. Now, obviously, it tapers, it goes down, but the high point, yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's an amazing car. I think. Yeah.
Right. And hopefully that will steer better because if
Yeah.
it's got the four-wheel steering, like one of the big problems with the big trucks and stuff is, at least I don't,
The
I'm not a
turning
big
ratio.
truck guy, but yeah, when you turn it, you can't really turn very sharply or anything. And that's actually a problem. That's the one thing with our Model Y that if I could fix it, I would. It's got a poor, it locks. Like once you turn enough, and I think it may only be about 45 degrees, but that's it. So
Okay.
you can't go further. And so I've had to do a lot of 3-point turns because the car doesn't make a very tight corner. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So something to improve.
yeah. I think it's because of the way the whole thing with the motor is built and all of that. But if you have front wheel and back wheel steering, you can effectively make it much tighter turns. So,
Yeah, that's right. Maybe they will. Hopefully, they change that someday.
Right.
But I have another question. Maybe we can go into full self driving now a little bit because
Sure.
we've seen a lot of changes happening there also, and it's improving steeply. Even if you look at the earnings and stuff like that, this will have a huge impact on the revenue also of Tesla because I mean.
Right.
One day they are Uber in the next second. So yeah,
Right.
this will be very interesting. But what are your thoughts? What is the biggest takeaway from FSD right now? What do you think is the most important thing in your interviews that you've conducted? Maybe you have a view on that on FSD.
I personally, I keep going up and down because the problem is they've gotten very, very long between their updates now. So it used to be, so I got full self-driving just about a year ago, almost exactly. It was like late October of 2021. And at the time, you were getting updates every couple of weeks. So it was very rapid iterations. But at the same time, they only had a few thousand people who were beta testers. So now I think it's 160,000 people are And so they have to be
Yeah,
very,
about
very
the.
careful
Mhm.
before they release this because it's not just a group of,
Yeah.
my friend Chuck Cook, who I don't know if you've seen
Yeah,
his famous
I
left
know
turn.
Chuck. I know
I
his
got to
turn as
experience
left
that
turn.
last week in person,
Yeah,
which
that's
was
so crazy.
pretty crazy. But he's an ex-Navy pilot and flies planes. So he's got the test pilot mentality. And so I think there's that kind of, that early beta testers are kind of like, I'm just going to go for it and we're going to see how this thing works, and very, very controlled at the same time. So paying attention. But the more people that are driving this, the more people who don't care are going to be
Mm,
driving it. So there will be a lot of people who are not that cognizant and
hmm
not really thinking about it as much. So I know they have to be very careful. And that's really slowed down the pace of innovation.
hmm
Some people have argued that Andre Carpathy leaving has slowed it down too, because it's an interesting coincidence that he
hmm
started
hmm
taking his sabbatical around June of this year, sorry, and that was about the time when things stopped going quite so quickly out the door. So
Interesting. Yeah, maybe.
I will not commit either way on that because I
Mm,
also think it just has to do with I think honestly that Andre, considering that he and Elon seem to be on very good terms still,
hmm
I just think that what happened was he got to the point where he said the pure research is done. We figured it
Exactly.
out. It's just a question of getting it to work. And that's an engineering task more than a research task.
hmm
And I think he was just like, at least, if it had been me and I was him, and I'm not because I'm not nearly that smart, but he probably was like, I'm kind of done and I don't really need to be here anymore because I'm just babysitting at this point.
hmm
So, the cool stuff, the interesting questions are done.
hmm
Um, but anyway, so that's the downside, and I'm concerned about that because things have taken longer. But the upside is that they're it they haven't got it working on the highway yet. They're still using the old version of the
hmm
software because it works really, really well. I
hmm
just did a video on doing road trips with the Tesla, and it's so good. And this is something that I think, like, if you're in Europe, you can also use a lot of the features of this, but basically lane following and yeah, I don't know,
Limited.
Lars,
It's limited. It's
yeah. So
yeah, because we have regulations, for example, that I
right,
think you
right,
can't change lanes by your car. So solely you have to click something that you have to initiate the lane change. The car
right,
can't initiate the lane change. I think that's the law.
right,
And
right.
yeah, Mercedes has also to comply to that. They have their drive by. Okay, it's horrible what they did, but yeah, it's a level 3 autonomy drive pilot
Right.
that
Right.
also can't lane change because of the
But
regulations.
isn't
But
it restricted to something like 70 kilometers an hour or
it's
something really, really
ridiculous. Yeah,
low?
you have to.
Yeah.
It's basically it is just an traffic jam assistant at this point. Yeah, it's
Yes.
just
Which, by the way, is not nothing. That
yeah,
is
it's
nice. But what is that? Auf Deutsch, Stau?
yeah,
Is that right?
Stauassistent. Yeah, it disables when low standing sun is, for example, when it's blinded a little
Oh,
bit and stuff like
no.
that. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's just we.
Okay, so that's the thing, and I feel bad for people who don't get a chance to try it because you live outside the U.S.
Yeah, it's so
or
sad.
you just don't have access to the car. I know, so we'll come and visit, and I'll drive you.
Yeah,
But it
FSD
is
tourism
okay,
will be will be a thing
right?
one day.
I think FSD tourism would be a thing,
It
but
would be.
it's really incredible. Like I haven't washed the car, I'm embarrassed to say, in a long time, and I've done 2 road trips with it, so it's very, very dirty. And the windshields are dirty and the cameras are dirty. And I'll drive straight into the sun, especially in the morning when I'm going to work. It's like straight east. And so it's like
hmm
right or southeast, I guess, but it's right into the sun. And the sun is, I can't see. I have to put the little shade down
hmm
and kind of, and this thing is just perfect. And I'm like, how is it seeing through this messy windshield with these it's just unbelievable. So the quality of what they've got and the safety, I don't really feel unsafe
hmm
doing full self-driving anymore. It what it does is it sometimes navigates very poorly. It won't get into the correct lane it needs to early enough. And it sometimes makes kind of weird jerky maneuvers where
hmm
it'll just kind of not sideways inside the lane, but when it's shifting lanes or something, it will sometimes make weird maneuvers, which bothers my wife a lot more than me. So she's just like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of safety, I don't it's very, very, very rare anymore with this version of the software, which is 10.69.3, that I have to intervene for safety reasons. Normally, I intervene because I just I want to go into another lane, or I want to
Hmm.
drive a little more aggressively than the car does. So, I'll do it for those reasons. I call those convenience interventions. The one thing I will say, and this is something I really wish Tesla would work on, this is a policy thing that when it sees people, so like in my neighborhood, we don't have sidewalks, so people walk on the street, and the car sees them, but it waits until the last second and goes around them. And as a human, it's like what you want to do is you want to tell them your intentions early. So you want to move over so that a long time ahead of time, so that the pedestrians are not concerned that you're
Hmm.
going to run into them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's not even changing the neural networks, it's just changing the policy decision. It's sort
Hmm.
of like, hey, if
How
you see people
aggressive or how yeah.
yeah, move out of the way earlier so that
Mm.
you can get around them
A
more
little bit more
conveniently.
safety, like
Yeah. And
headroom
it's not
would be
really so
great.
much safety, it's because I know the car's going to get out of the way. It's more like you see the pedestrians starting to go like, this guy's going to run straight into me. And
Yeah.
then the car goes whoop, like around them. So it does it fine. It's just, it does it too late in my mind. You
Hmm.
need to do it very early so that, especially when it's in your neighborhood, you don't want your neighbors mad at you. They're like, there's that Tesla again. he's like, he's like trying to hit me every
Yeah.
time. So I will
Mm.
generally disengage when I see pedestrians in my neighborhood because I don't want them to get upset with me.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Or
so,
they start to
so
ring
yeah,
your doorbell and say,
yeah,
sell the
exactly. They all know
Tesla,
where I
sell the
live.
Tesla.
I have
Or
two Huskies. I have a Tesla. I'm pretty obvious. It's hard for me to hide. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's very interesting that this is a problem. I think this is a whole area with the car and the artificial intelligence interaction or robot interaction, you could say that,
right,
because it is like that you have to adjust to the human also. Like if even if the car can anticipate that and oh yeah, no problem, and you just swoops
right,
around you, but the human has to feel safe. And there are some
right,
concepts in China, for example, they are developing or researching that with eyes on the car, or that the human really see,
right,
or in Japan also that the car sees me now, and now I know,
right.
or with LEDs that there's a symbol in front with LED matrix and stuff like that. Maybe something like that will also be implemented someday. Yeah,
Right.
but time will tell if this is
Yeah.
necessary. But I think
I think
yeah.
what you're saying is exactly right. The car behaves like a robot
Yeah.
in the sense that it's perfectly safe and it's going to be fine, but it doesn't have a concept of what it is to be a human being and
Hmm.
to feel very vulnerable. If you're out on a road and a car's coming at you, the car is going to win. Like
Yeah,
it's a couple of tons
probably.
of stuff versus you. And so, so you worry about that and you get concerned. And so obviously the car, you can see the little path and it shows it going around, but it just does it too late. And so it's more of it's thinking like a human. It's like, how could I make this more convenient for the pedestrians on the road, less scary?
Hmm.
So,
With your interviews you've conducted, and you ask a lot of specialists also on the topic of FSD.
right.
I've seen some videos of you, of course, because I also follow your channel. That's a good hit right now. If somebody is not subscribed to Dr. Know It All, please do it right now. But come back to this interview back,
That's right.
please.
There you go. You
And
can do
don't
it at
watch
the
too
end of
much
this interview.
videos before you come back here.
Yeah,
Watch this video.
exactly.
Yeah, but I highly recommend it. It's a very great channel, and I really love your content. So, yeah, what I wanted to get into is how is your time horizon of FSD being better than a human driver? What's your prediction based on the stuff you've heard and on your testing? And I
Right.
kind of hear a little hesitancy when you talk about it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
but that's a great
Well,
thing.
it's hard for me to know being on the outside,
Yeah,
and
of
there's a
course.
lot of variables. So I had claimed like fairly early this year that it would be by the end of 2022. So now we're down to 2 months. So it's getting really tight.
Okay.
So I it's such a hard thing. I think a lot of people think full self-driving is a destination, and you have to stop thinking about it that way. It's a journey.
Hmm.
There's never a finishing line with it because you can
Yeah,
always
exactly.
make your drive more perfect than it was, even as a human being, right?
Yeah.
If you drive wherever you drive to some place to pick up your kids from school, go to work, whatever, if you evaluate your drive, and I try to do that as a person, I go back and I think like, what things could I have done better on that drive
Hmm.
and made a better drive? So there's never a finishing line because there's always another point something nine that you can increase the improve it. But so the marker in my sense is if you take like all of the human being drivers like this, right? You've got a bell curve. So there's the average human driver, then there's people who are not that good,
Hmm.
and then there's people who are really good, and then at the tail end there's people who are excellent drivers. Maybe, people
Hmm.
who drive Formula One cars or something.
Yeah.
I expect that they're probably very, very good drivers. So, and that would, by the way, I think that that will be the ultimate proof. Will be someday if you have
Ah.
autonomous Formula One.
Yeah,
Those are
that was
those are hard.
crazy. Yeah.
And also it's got to be reacting at what do they drive? Over 300, something like that, over
Hmm.
300 kilometers an hour
Yeah.
at high speeds. So, it's got to, that's crazy. So if a car can ever do that, then we could just basically forget about it because that proves it's better than almost all human beings. Um, but I think in terms of getting over the hump and being better than the middle guy, so whoever that middle person is, the average driver, I don't think it's going to take that much longer.
Hmm.
The problem is that the car drives differently than a human being. So where it makes kind of weird, dumb mistakes is not the same place necessarily that a human being would make weird, dumb mistakes. So we kind of judge it saying like, well, that's a dumb mistake that it made, and that's not what any human would do. But at the same time, it does. If you think about like all the drivers who are less than the average driver, it does way better than all of them. Yeah, okay, that human wouldn't have made that mistake, but they would make 10 other mistakes that the car doesn't make. And I have a 15-year-old at home
Hmm.
who's just learning to drive, and he's getting good now, but the first couple of, weeks and months is like it's a terrifying thing to like sit there in the car, and at least with the full self-driving I can like take over when I want, but with him I can't. So
Just
uh
grab to the steering wheel.
yeah,
No, this
exactly. There were
way.
times I wanted to grab the steering wheel and like so but it it's been instructive to look at a human being because the car is way better than he is at some things. He's really bad at maintaining his speed on the highway.
Hmm.
So he goes fast, then slow, then fast, then slow, then
Hmm.
fast, then
Hmm.
slow. And we're trying not to have him use like autopilot or anything yet because I wanted to learn how to
Of
drive.
course, yeah.
So, but the car, it will be exactly, and it will always stay the right distance behind other cars, and it will always stay exactly in the middle of the lane. So you don't have to work because he'll also, sometimes do this where
Hmm.
he's weaving around the lanes a little bit. So it does things really good that humans are not particularly good at. And then it just will make a dumb mistake, like make a left-hand turn where it's like,
Hmm.
like something
Hmm.
like that. So it's really hard to judge because it's just different than a human. Um, but again, like I said, I'm kind of going off of how many interventions do I have to do that are critical? So as opposed to me again going like I just want to get in this other lane because I can see that there's no traffic in that lane and it would be faster or something. That's just because I want to do it. But what things are that happen that are critical, and if I didn't take over, I was concerned the car was going to have an
Hmm.
accident. And those are very, very few and far between. It's not that much. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, no specific date and time, but just like it's more or less a journey. But you also see that
Right.
it's improving, but you wouldn't say that. Yeah, it depends how you look at it. It might get better than the average driver, but where is the exact line?
Right.
Yeah, something like that.
It's a very difficult thing to judge. I think that probably what Tesla has with their millions of miles between accidents is probably a reasonable
Hmm.
estimation of it. But the problem is you still got a human being there. So,
Hmm.
right. So like if the thing, it looks like it's about to crash, I'll make it not crash. So I hope. So that
Hmm.
means that it never registered an accident. Whereas if the car had totally driven itself and I had not taken over, it might have had an accident.
Hmm.
So that number is skewed a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you
I
mean.
sort of
Yeah.
call it like hybrid or cyborg driving right now.
Hmm.
So the car plus me is better than either the car or me
Ah,
by
yeah. Hmm.
ourselves. So it's like we're like we've created this beautiful
Hybrid.
symbiosis
Yeah.
between. Yeah, yeah. So so that's really cool, and I love that. Um,
But it's not in that stage that you can play
right.
The Witcher 3 on your
Yeah, and I would love to be able. That would be
yeah,
ideal. I would love that.
yeah,
So
a
I
little
think
bit of
number one
gaming.
that's got to happen is it's got to go on the highway.
Hmm.
So currently it uses the old network. Now it's using all the vision and all of that kind of stuff. The second thing that needs to happen and is I think going to happen very soon with 10.69.3.1 or whatever. These numbering things are ridiculous
Yeah.
because they're making huge updates and calling it a .01 update. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, but I think that what we're going to see is currently the occupancy network, which I think was the absolute critical
Hmm.
discovery invention that needed to happen to make full self-driving work. And if people don't know what it does, is it creates little tiny cubes and it projects them out into the world. They're 30 centimeters on the side.
Hmm.
So about, kind of like yay big. And it makes everything in the world. Is this a drivable surface? Is this something I can
Hmm.
collide with? So avoid it. Other things. And then of course it splits it out. It's like, hopefully that's a person, maybe that's a car, things like that. But basically that volume is only 120 meters right now. So that's all the car can see. And I believe it's 20 meters behind you and 100 in front. So if you think about a football pitch, right, that's all you got. That's not that far when you're driving at highway speeds.
Hmm.
And so what it does a lot of times is it makes mistakes. You see it like not see, like you see a light turn red
Hmm.
on a very high speed road and you're like, uh-oh, that light's red, or a car goes across or something. And you can see it because you can see farther, much farther than 100 meters away. But the car doesn't react until you get to that lane. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay. So then it starts to aggressively brake or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And so my understanding is that they're going to change that. So it's going to go from 30 centimeter voxels to variable resolution voxels,
Hmm.
which means they will be very, very small up close. If you saw the Optimus bot, you could see
Hmm.
the occupancy network for the Optimus is much smaller,
Hmm.
the voxels. Um, and so it'll have small voxels up close, and then they'll get bigger and bigger the further away. And so what I was told was that you'll be able to see the car will be able to see all the way to the sky. It will
Hmm.
actually be able to see infinitely far away, effectively, right? But at low resolution, but it
Hmm.
doesn't really matter because far away, it's like, well, there's something black in
Hmm.
that big voxel. And so maybe that's a car. And so I better start paying attention to it. And as it gets closer, it'll shrink down and it'll understand it better and better. So that will make a really big difference. And so I'm waiting for that one to come out. And like if that actually happens, then I think we're in really good shape. And then the highway. The highway is the big last thing that needs to happen.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
but what is interesting is the approach of every other car maker and every other autonomy or self-driving company is focusing on put as many sensors in that you get say with lidar sensors and everything. Especially
Right.
the Mercedes, for example, has a lot of sensors. But the problem with that is that these sensors have to talk and to
Right.
the computer has to iterate, or the brain of the car has to iterate. Okay, wait, which sensor is correct now,
Right.
and
Right.
stuff like that. It's like a council of sensors that just says he's right. Okay, votes. Okay, yeah, he might be right,
That's
but
literally what's happening.
yeah,
It's just happening really, really fast.
yeah,
And that causes that causes the exact problem of sensor fusion. Whereas if they don't vote the same, then you're like, what's
disengage,
the
just
right answer?
disengage.
We
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's also why I think like the approach of the other car manufacturers is a little bit yeah, limited because of that. I don't see it really happening because it's too complicated, the problem then, because of the diffusion that's happening there. And but also the approach of Tesla with the vision and with AI is the approach. I mean, if you think about it, that's something also that I think the general population doesn't get about what's Tesla doing. They are solving real life vision. That's the thing that they are doing. And that's why it's so important also to have something like the Tesla bot to see a proof of concept, at least that look, this thing can recognize objects. Do you understand what and it can interact with those objects on its own. Nobody has to program anything. It's learning by itself.
right.
And that's, I think, where it makes click with a lot of people, because then they think, oh, the FSD is it the lane assist? What is it? Like
Right. Yeah.
they don't really get it, what's happening there.
It's actually, I hadn't really thought about this before, but you could think about it sort of along the lines of what like Dolly
Hmm.
and Imogen and other programs like that. When they started off, people are like, "Oh, that's cute and that's really neat. It's a nice party trick." And so
Yeah.
people think of full self-driving as a party trick.
Mm.
But the implications for full self-driving are much, much bigger than full self-driving.
Exactly.
And so everyone should root for Tesla's solution, because if they get this, they actually have figured out how to make a computer understand the world. And that, I mean, think about that's far beyond just a car. And obviously then you've got Optimus the robot, but you could have, I don't know, just a random thing. You could have very cheap cameras for a security system for a company, right? And you put them up, and rather than those like motion sensors where
Hmm.
my doorbell is always going
Hmm.
off and saying there's somebody there, it's like, yeah, I know, I'm standing in the front yard, right? So it's very annoying. But like, it's like,
Yeah,
what if you had a vision system that could say, oh, that's John, don't worry about
yeah,
that, or that's the neighbor walking the dog, don't worry about that, or this guy looks like he might be a problem, so worry about that. But that just, and I had gosh, was it Scott again who said this? I don't know if it was him or not, but anyway, the
hmm,
idea of a pool camera, just a cheap little camera that looked down if somebody has a swimming pool in their backyard, and it could figure out whether a child had jumped into the pool
oh
and was
yeah,
drowning. Yeah, I mean, just
yeah,
it
the
seems like
crazy, yeah.
such a simple
Hmm.
thing, but how hard is that to do? You have to identify a human being. You have to identify whether they look like they're in trouble or just play,
Hmm.
because you
Hmm.
know how kids do.
Yeah,
They'll splash around, right? So it's like, what escalation of things has to happen before it recognizes that? If it can solve vision, there's just a world of things, and I'm sure my brain is too small to even think of them, but there will be so many cool things that will come out of this that it's far beyond just the driving.
yeah,
There will be many, many other cool things that'll happen.
yeah. The fusion of those technologies, the artificial intelligence with the hardware, with the electric motors and the battery and stuff like that. The batteries get smaller and smaller, or more efficient
Right,
and more efficient. The more they research that field. I mean, without the smartphone, the electric revolution wouldn't have happened, I think. So
right,
because also the lithium-ion batteries were
sure,
cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and that's why they could really
right,
utilize it for cars with pouch cells at first, but we all know that's a
right.
bad idea. uh, or not not everybody knows that. Some car brands don't think it's a
Yeah,
bad idea.
yeah.
But okay. Yeah.
But
Go
you're
on.
right. I mean, it's also laptops too, but yeah,
Yeah,
laptops,
yeah,
cell
of
phones.
course,
It's
of
it's
course.
however many batteries you can make, that just it reduces the cost of the batteries, the quality of the batteries goes up. That's important. It's really important to understand that, like, when you're driving around in a battery operated vehicle, it's like a gas car in the sense that you've got a lot of energy stored in the vehicle.
Hmm.
And the fact that these cells don't just start catching on fire
Hmm.
and things like that all the time is really amazing. And it's a testament not
Yeah,
to, I mean, to Tesla and to
yeah.
other companies, but to decades of work in battery technology.
Hmm.
That it's all the way dating back to at least the 1970s or so,
Yeah.
when John Goodenough, like, came up with the lithium ion battery concept, and then they had nickel metal. Anyway, all of that stuff, it's just a testament to the world.
Hmm.
The technology that we have created over the past 50 years is incredible.
Yeah, and what also is so incredible is that you see when humanity, maybe we can go into the broader context now, if humanity focuses on one technology or one core technology, how fast the pace of innovation is.
Right,
Like Elon
right,
also talked about that. Yeah, that's so interesting. The market focused on smartphones for a long time, for the last 15 or 16, 17 years. Now you
right.
see the sales numbers are kind of declining. It's not as
Yeah.
much innovation happening. All the phones look the same. Oh, it has 3 cameras now, and now it has 8, and now it
Now it
has
has 3 cameras.
and stuff like that. And
Maybe it's gone into the
in
watches
the
now.
watches, yeah, that's the next thing. Also, but in terms of real revolutionary innovation, is not really happening. I mean, the
No.
smartphone now, it has to have a big screen. Okay, now Samsung has their flip phones back and stuff
Right,
like that. A little bit nostalgia. It's a cool thing if you have a phone and then a tablet. Suddenly, the concept is great.
right.
I think it just needs some more years to really mature. But yeah, but it's interesting how it is when the market and all the resources are poured into one product category, and suddenly you see
Right.
the improvement like is skyrocketing. Now it's the software space. I think the
Right.
AI, artificial intelligence, in together with the concept of the service have a great learning platform
Right.
to make your AI learn. Yeah, that's so incredible. You know the AI field. Do you have something in mind that you say, oh wow, this is a topic that maybe Tesla has to tackle one day, or something like a space or area where you would say there is some juice in that, or something like that? Yeah,
I, well, they already are.
yeah.
I think one of the big things that's happened is there was kind of a couple of branches, and I wouldn't even call it AI, but like let's say robotics.
Hmm.
Robotics was all about very expensive sensors and
Hmm.
other items like LiDAR and stuff,
Yeah.
which if you go back 25 years, LiDAR was really expensive, and
Hmm.
like $100,000 per unit or so. It was crazy. But if you wanted to do robotics and some sort of autonomy, you had to have these very expensive sensors and things. And that was in the robotics moving around sort of realm. And then AI, of course, started very much in the abstract on a computer, whether it was
Hmm.
playing chess or
Go.
solving some
Yeah.
some go yeah. But I'm talking about like even further back than that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that
Hmm.
it was very much on the computer and very much software based. And what we're seeing right now is this merging together of them. And what we're getting from AI being applied to things like robotics, and the Tesla automobile counts as a robot,
Hmm.
is that we're seeing that those really expensive sensors, you can replace that with a brain. So if you think about human beings, we don't have LiDAR, we don't have cool fish like sonar and things like that. We don't have stuff like that. We have really adequate, but not super excessively adequate eyes and ears
Yeah.
and stuff. But what we have is a really big brain
Hmm.
so that we can put all this stuff together and we can figure out what's going on. So that's what we're starting to see is like, and you can see with Tesla, they don't require radar anymore. They don't require the ultrasonic sensors anymore. So they're down to 8 cameras. That's what the car has, and an IMU, which tells it how fast it's moving and things like that. Um, but all those things are very, very inexpensive.
Hmm.
This has gone from something that you have to get a grant from the federal government to get enough money to buy the sensors to build this thing, to a consumer like you and me for a couple of $100s could buy these same exact 8 cameras and utilize them. Now,
Hmm.
I couldn't build the brain inside
Yeah.
it, but I'm saying, so we're reducing the cost of hardware by having a better brain.
Hmm.
Every time we get an upgrade in the brain, we can reduce the cost of what it is that we need. And plus the fact hardware is improving too, right? So we've got Samsung's making 5.4 megapixel cameras that they're now putting into the Teslas as opposed to the old 1.3 or
Hmm.
whatever they are that's in my car. So, hardware is obviously improving too, but we're getting that merging.
Hmm.
And you can see Apple kind of going that direction too. All of their chips now have the M1, M2, M1 Max, things like that. They have neural network accelerators built into the
Yeah.
chips. And so they're clearly saying AI is the future.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that's also a merger of hardware and software,
Yeah.
because now you've got hardware that supports high-end AI acceleration. So yeah,
Yeah. That's absolutely crazy what's happening there.
right.
Uh, I have one question. Do you see again to full self driving? Do you see problems with the global rollout? Would you say, or because of the regulations everywhere? Or do you think the team could adapt very easily to the local laws and stuff like that?
So from a technology standpoint, some places will be easy. I mean, you could see that they were able to roll out to Canada relatively easy.
Hmm.
And Canada has some different regulations. And of course, they use kilometers per hour instead of miles per hour. So that's a big change. But the vehicles were able to do that. So I would expect places like now Germany and France and Europe in general has a lot of very narrow roads that the US doesn't have. So retraining, obviously, but I'm sure they have vehicles out there doing it now.
Hmm.
I would think a major change would be going to a country like the United Kingdom, where they drive on the other side of the
Oh
road.
yeah. Mm. Oh
so,
yeah.
so
Hmm.
that's going to require some
Yeah.
significant retooling. But I don't even think that's going to be that bad. It's going to be places like, I don't know if you've ever traveled to like India, Nepal.
I was in Vietnam, for example. I know the
Oh
traffic.
yeah,
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 Vietnam is
yeah.
also special with their traffic. Let's say that with all the motorcycles and scooters. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So there it's like, but this is again where neural networks are going to outperform anything else, because if you make it hard coded, like in Germany and the United States, people tend to obey the rules, and it's like, okay,
Hmm.
there's a traffic light, you stop behind the line,
Hmm.
you stay in your lane, you go to the next place. When you go to countries like that, it's almost like a swarm.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
It's
like
just
swarm
everybody's kind
intelligence.
of
Yeah, yeah,
going, yeah,
absolutely,
it's like
100%. I was driving
right.
also with the scooter in Vietnam, and through the narrow traffic, I was the biggest person there. It was like very strange to drive through there because I'm
Right.
also a little bit chubbier. So
So yeah, but and
Yeah.
it's almost a contact sport where you
Yeah.
kind of like bump into each other. But I think neural network can handle situations that are less defined. But that's going to be the PhD.
Yeah.
So right now, full self-driving might be like in high school or maybe at university in the United States and Canada, and then it's going to have to like move on. But when it gets its PhD is when it can handle a place like Bangladesh or something like that, or Bangalore, India, or something. Then we're going to be talking.
Yeah.
So that's a little ways in the future still, but
Yeah.
but as far as regulation is concerned, I really think that some probably this is my just I'm hazarding a guess here. Some medium-sized town, so not like a city like New York City or a
Hmm.
big town or something like that, but someplace in the US or Canada, maybe in the middle part of the country. So like I just said Wichita, Kansas, because I thought that was interesting, but I don't know exactly how many people live there, but let's say 50,000 people live there. So it's a small-ish town. And what if they just said, "Oh yeah, it looks like what Tesla's showing us is good enough. And so we want to be number one in the world to
Hmm.
allow them to do robotaxis within some area."
Hmm.
And then Tesla can just geofence it and
Yeah.
say, like, within this area, you don't have to drive. So that's my guess, is that some sort of like, not like a tiny little village and not a really, really big city, but some small medium-sized town
Hmm.
in the United States or in Canada will want to be first, because
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's going to be all the press and all the people talking about
Exactly.
them and that. So they'll make that happen. And then, everyone's going to hold their breath, including Tesla, and wait a couple of months, and hopefully no accidents will
Yeah.
happen. And then once you reach that point, if there's a tipping point, and let's say we've gone 6 or 8 weeks without a significant accident with that, then all of a sudden it's going to go pop, 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 pop,
Hmm.
pop.
Yeah.
So
It's gonna
like
spread.
cities
Yeah.
everywhere are going to start to do it. And then of course the United States federal government will start thinking about whether they can do it for long distances over highways and things like that. So
Hmm.
that's my guess, is
Hmm.
that once one city does it, if nothing bad happens in a 6 or 8 weeks or something, then it's just going to go like
Gonna
really
explode.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that this is the biggest bet for regulation changes also in Europe. If they see, for example, everybody goes to the convention centers in the US and Las Vegas and stuff like that, and they
Right.
see, okay, uh, Robotaxi just drove me here. What is happening?
Right.
Why is this the future? Why?
Right.
Then they go back to their country and like, oh, okay, oh, this is so depressing here.
This is
Maybe
really
we want
boring.
some Robotaxis as well, and then maybe the shift will start because they don't want to be left behind, and then they start to react. And I hope this mentality also changes in Germany, that this risk averseness is so risky. If you think about it long term, it's riskier than taking risks in the first place. And that's
Right.
something that I hope the German regulators or the German people like adapt a little bit more or learn a little bit. Yeah, it can be a hybrid between the American culture and the German culture. This would be a
Right.
sweet spot, I think.
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
it's something like that.
It's good
Or
to have protections.
yeah,
You want to have
yeah,
protections. You
yeah,
don't want to
but
just go crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very interesting. Also, what you said, and yeah, I'm very happy to have you on the show right now.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I
It's
have
my pleasure.
yeah, and I have just one last question for the end. Maybe just a small overview. What do you think about the acquisition of Twitter right now? Because it's in the headlines as well.
You couldn't get away today without, I mean,
Yeah, no, I have
consider
to. I
today
have to
is
ask.
the day, right?
Yeah.
Ah. I really hope for the best.
Okay.
That's what I
Okay.
I mean, Elon is getting into an arena that it's I don't know. There's a metaphor in English, the hot potato,
Hmm.
which is like if
Yeah.
you,
Like,
so nobody,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. I
it's
know
like
what you mean. Yeah.
the whole social media environment is such a hot potato that I'm like,
Yeah. It
oh, I
is.
would not touch that. But he's a very risk taking kind of person. So my only fear is that he could potentially be slightly naive in the sense of the ability to not control but to guide
Hmm.
social media in a direction. I mean, he talks about the hellscape of people having their own echo chambers and only talking about things that they agree with all the time. and I just don't know how you avoid that.
Hmm.
The problem with social media is like if I don't like somebody, I just block them or I don't look at their stuff. And
Yeah.
so what happens is over time, and I try really hard not to let this happen, but it tends to be that you get a bubble of people who agree with you. And you're like, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. Yes, I
Hmm.
agree. And you're like, wow, the world agrees with me.
Yeah.
What are these other crazy people out there?
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve that problem.
I think discussion, like a fruitful and respectful discussion
Yes.
online, is so hard to achieve
Mhm.
because you're behind your keyboard. Now, anonymity is more or less off the table. So that changed a little bit, but the people are still very harsh to each other and don't realize that
Right.
it's not about shouting at each other. It's about discussion and also listening to each other and try to understand the point of the other person. So I think it's a very noble or nice thing to try to solve this problem, but it's a very difficult problem to solve. The world changed so much because of social media, and it's very intense right now because also the
Right.
split of the societies in left to right is not only in the US, it's also in Germany, it's also everywhere. It's nearly everywhere. And
Right.
also you saw those revolutions in the Arabic states, for example, that was happening there because the people could voice their concerns and stuff online. The internet
Yeah.
can be very freeing, but also very restrictive. You have to
Right.
find the sweet spot where you cannot offend people all the time, and like it has to be a civil discussion, but it's very hard to achieve that. I see your point that it's really difficult for him to
Right.
touch this hot potato. But I also agree with him that it's kind of necessary to try at least to have an alternative
Right.
to everything else. And I think Twitter is popular enough. Like the other social media platforms are still, I think, too small. For example, Parler, or it attracted some people that are very questionable, at least you could say that.
Right.
Then the platform has a stigma right in the first place, but Twitter is more or less neutral in that regard and seen as in the same ballpark as Facebook and everything else. So I think it has a lot of potential. And I hope the best that this will.
Hey, I mean, on the good end of things, if you had asked me in 2005 whether Elon would have succeeded with either SpaceX or Tesla, I would have said, hell no.
It's
I would have
difficult.
said, what are you, crazy? That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and he clearly did it with two companies that should not have survived. So, so hopefully 10 years from now, I'll be proven very, very wrong. I would be most happy to be wrong about that because we do absolutely need something. And I like the humbleness of, he wrote that letter to the advertisers and said, the humbleness of what he was writing was very good.
Yeah.
I think it's important. And to say, like, I don't know if this is going to work. I hope it does, but we're going to try our best. And that's a good attitude to have. It's like fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah. And I hope that Tesla owners Silicon Valley will unblock me.
Why have they blocked you?
Yeah, they blocked me because I was starting Twitter and I didn't know how it worked with my TeslaFix handle and everything. And the problem was I was meme spamming. I didn't realize that when I commented on something that it's shown in my timeline all the time, and I didn't realize that. I was like a total noob in that area, and they just like, okay, block this guy. They followed me and just blocked me right away. And I was like, oh no. And now I always see blocked tweets where Elon Musk replies, and I don't know what's going on, please. Yeah.
Well, I'll reach out to them. I want somebody to reach out to Lex Friedman for me because I don't know why, but he blocked me. I don't even know why.
Okay.
Like somehow I got blocked by him.
Maybe I can write him a DM, but I don't have.
There you go.
No. But I'm not close with Lex Friedman, of course.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
maybe you can
I
ask.
do actually know some of the folks there, so I'll ask.
Please ask, because I won't meme spam, but I can reach out to them.
I'll put it on there. Yeah, I'll just say like, "Hey guys, he didn't mean that."
Because I want to read their tweets. It's like horrible. I can't even find them. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. If that saga ends, I will be very happy because their content is very interesting, and I don't want to miss out on anything because it's so important also for the Tesla space because they interviewed Elon Musk and stuff. Cool. Okay. John, really, I really appreciate the lengthy interview, but I really liked it. You made some great points, and I really like your view, and you're doing a great job with interviewing inside of the Tesla community, and what you do, your work is very great. So everybody who isn't subscribed to him, please subscribe. I mean, I have my nearly 1,000 subscribers here, very small channel.
Soon it'll be 10,000.
Soon it will be 10,000. Yeah, exactly. But I really enjoy the community, and I'm very happy to talk to you. If you have something to say for the end, maybe you have something you are working on.
I would, because as it turns out, in 1 hour from now, I'm going to get online with Lars Stradritter, who is BestInTESLA, and also Randy Kirk, and also Brian Wang. We have a book that's coming out on November 1st, and so we're actually going to be today recording like some chat about the book, and then we'll release it after the book comes out on November 1st. But anyway, so yeah, the book's coming out. It's called The Elon Musk Mission.
Oh, cool. So you were also working on that book. I wasn't sure. Cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Just a couple of chapters, but yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. I'm very excited about that. I was so excited when he announced that he has a big announcement. I'm also like I also had Lars on my channel a lot of times.
Cool.
We have great chemistry. It's very funny to talk. He's so awesome. He's so funny to talk to, and we are always giggling and stuff like that. It's very nice atmosphere. I really like him. So I'm looking forward to that book. So to everybody, when you look at this, and the book is already released, just
it's actually pre-released, so you can pre-order it on Amazon. So we're trying to make it hit like #1 on Amazon.
That would
like
be
the
awesome.
Category, so
that'd be awesome. Fingers crossed. So support their rollout phase. I think it's very important to support the rollout phase. That's already marketing-wise spread it, so everybody can and order it. Yeah, cool.
Buy it, tell your friends, all that good stuff. Anyway, so
I'm excited for that. Okay, cool, awesome. John. So thank you very much to John for being here, Dr. Know-It-All, and I hope that everybody of you was entertained and got something out of this interview. So there's only one last thing to say right now to everybody. Goodbye to everybody.
Auf Wiedersehen.